You ever wish you could just go back home? Simpler time, a better time. Let's check in on home right now. Osaka. On the mouth of the Kyoto River lies a massive conurbation of skyscrapers and concrete, stretching its fingers into the Seto Inland Sea. Its name is Osaka, the third largest city in the home islands. Despite its glitzy and modern atmosphere, the origins of Osaka date back to the Kofun period, where it was known as Naniwa. Strategically located on a hill in the middle of a fertile plain, the city became a major commercial and manufacturing hub in medieval Japan, and many modern Japanese corporations like Matsushita Electric and Fujita can trace their origins to Osaka. After the war, Osaka saw its fortunes grow more than ever, as goods and raw materials coming from Japan's newly conquered territories found their way to its port. However, if one is willing to look past the exploitation, Osaka can be a charming city, full of jovial people, where one can bask in the glow of its neon lights. So similar and yet so different to home. Oh, so different compared to where we're at now. Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. My name is Mr. Dogboat333, and welcome back to Hearts of Iron 4, the New Order Last Days of Europe as the state of Guangdong. You guys like that little intro. I figured I'd try something a little different for the intro. Last time we were here together, we had some riots break out. And let me tell you, it looks kind of nasty. But I'm sure we could figure something out. We're in a bit of a problem because we have the budget freeze. So that's limiting some of the things that we can do. But I want to see if we can manage this without breaking the budget freeze. Because we made a promise to them to not touch anything. So if we can keep that promise, I'd be impressed, number one. But number two, saves us a few seats. But yeah, I'm actually not doing this on stream. I figured I'd get working on some parts offline. Maybe just finish this all off online on my own. So I'm not going to be looking at chat. Although, granted, chat has been kind of dead the past couple times I've streamed. So it's not going to make too much of a difference if I'm honest. I'm only slightly bitter about that, of course. It's alright, I don't mind too much. But I figured now is as good a time as any to just hop in and get to it. With some offline pressures. You know, the effects from the product cycle. Not too surprised about that. Could speak to the Legislative Council. Concerns are raising, but not too badly. I think we'll speak to them a little bit, just to make sure things relax. There is one subject in the riots that everyone around Chief Executive Matsushita Masahara steadfastly refused to voice aloud, even if everyone had thought it more than possible. The Republic of China, never friendly to Guangdong's existence, had kept its public statements limited to calling for the protection of Chinese citizens in Guangdong. Their staff had been a thorn in the side of the government, claiming consular privileges over Chinese nationals, gumming up investigations seemingly at random. And what if the interventions by the Chinese weren't random? What if, in addition to consular assistance, the Chinese had decided to vent their displeasure with Guangdong through more active interference? The motives and opportunities were present. All that remained were the means. Quietly, police made up as many safe, deniable queries as they could considering the consulate's recent activities. They wouldn't take the first step into a diplomatic minefield that would surely result from a full investigation, but it would be negligent not to lay the foundations at a time. What are the Chinese up to? The government now has the option to investigate the Chinese consulate general's role in the Guangdong riots via the riots decision category. Of course, an investigation into something this explosive may have severe consequences if mishandled. Well, of course. Nothing can ever be so easy. Well, let's begin an effort to uncover whether or not the Chinese are aiding the rioters, and if so, how deep their support goes. If we suspect the RC of interfering in the riots, then we will investigate the consul general, but there will be severe consequences if we are wrong. Whew. Right now we are out of harm's way. Let's work on giving them an inch. Lowest hanging fruit to defuse the crisis is to take one step towards the distance, even if it empowers our critics. So Cheong Kong will get a seat taken from us, but interestingly, Sony's going to take a seat from Fujitsu and a seat from Hitachi as well, which I can get behind. In accordance with our method of handling the situation, we'll once again use appeasement to calm the workers down and prevent them from causing a possible escalation in the severity of the situation. The workers descend to the streets, definitely without reasoning, and everyone has their own reason to protest and riot. And it does not take a genius analysis to wonder what the rioters want. They have centered their campaign of protest to demand things such as better wages, improvement of working conditions, and reasonable work hours, among many other things. To bring order back on the streets, perhaps it is time for us to review our current policies and perhaps give laborers the rights and conditions, along with enforcing them effectively to appease the rioters. So we can arrest GFT leaders after nightfall as well as meet with notables. This will decrease strength and radicalism, but lose some expat support. On top of that, so I think I'll do that. Also go ahead and do the same here, although that's going to hurt our Zujin and Chinese support. Still have our budget frozen, but we still can do some basic stuff. We could just try negotiating it all right now, but that's going to be very risky, I think. Ooh. In the dim light of sunset, Chief Executive Masaharu thoroughly selected a nondescript folder from the stack upon his desk, unassuming in every form, but not for a single deliberate scribble at the top left corner. There's no storage of police documents to review these days, and while that provided sufficient cover for the folder in question, he had to ensure this folder didn't end up in the wrong hands. Reason was immediately clear from the first line of enclosed text. Recommendations for observations. Consul General of the Republic of China. For the Chief Executive's eyes only. Even reading those two lines were enough to make Masaharu's eyes shoot to the door. And then, the windows, for fear of prying eyes. Suspicion about the Chinese government's role in the riots was commonplace. Less common was for such suspicion to be voiced, let alone on paper. After a deep breath to steady his hand, Masaharu's eyes flipped to the memorandum, absorbing its contents as quickly as he dared. There were several avenues for investigation, scoping out the motivations and official communications of the Consulate General, finding material evidence of their support for the Committee of Chinese Labor, or building a profile around Consul General Song Zhiguang and political attaché Wang Jingzhu. The Chinese truly were stirring up the pot in Guangdong, then there would have to be some trail to follow. And if the Chinese weren't involved, and they caught the chief executive prying into their diplomatic affairs, there would surely be hell to pay. Let's try to identify any material links with the CCL. That seems like the most, or the least immediately fucked, potentially. To crack down on domestic dissent is well within the chief executive's rights, no matter how much of a fuss China makes about it. But to accuse the Chinese government of active involvement, the entire investigation is a diplomatic time bomb, and the only way to make sure Guangdong is not caught in the blast radius was to secure proof, not just circumstantial, but substantive proof of China's involvement. If the evidence won't convince the Chinese to back off, then it has to be good enough to keep the Japanese on Guangdong's side should it come down to it. On top of that, finding the smoking gun implicating the Chinese government amidst the chaos of the ongoing riots is far easier said than done, but the cross-border nature of any involvement gives us somewhere to start. The police are looking at two options. They could either interdict any suspicious traffic crossing the Chinese border at considerable cost to police resources, or to intercept any suspected packages delivered to the Consulate General, but at the risk of tipping the Chinese off. Let's go wide. Set up border checkpoints. Already very risky. Oh. Shit. The first day had been bad. The following days had been worse. We had tried to keep it himself, and made himself as small and scarce as possible. That had quickly proven difficult. Every day since his arrest, more and more men were being thrown into the prisons, and the cells were quickly becoming cramped. Is there any option? Okay, we can do a little bit of that. Okay. No one cared about him, which was a good and bad thing. It was good because no one bothered him. The prisoners inside already ignored him, and the guards were occupied by unruly prisoners. No one harassed him, but no one was his friend either. He quickly learned that everything was scarce in prison. It was worse as more people were incarcerated. He barely got enough food every day, but he had resolved that no matter what, he was going to press forward. This place would not claim him. Day was going to take a risk. There's another man who seemed around his age and unlikely to be a hardened criminal. He likely had been part of the protest. He took a breath and approached the man to raise an eyebrow. Who he's approached? Protests? Protest. Part of the first wave here. Guess as much. Came a few days after you then. My name is Peng. What's yours? My name is Lei Hui, he answered, extending a hand. It was a small thing, but he hoped that he finally had found someone here in this prison who could trust. And I'm not going to die here. Friends made in the darkest places. I wonder if we're going to get the product cycle pop up. That would be funny. It was a small change, hardly worth a notice after the riots. A revision of the existing security framework, a minor reform pushed by some forgettable agency within a sea of forgettable agencies. To the reporting chief executive. A prior announcement had been buried in a series of public notices sent to business leaders to prepare them for possible inconveniences. Get out of a truck, said Zhao Zhuyi of the Guangdong police force. It was the second week of their patrols along the border of China and the first week of mandatory cargo searches. I said, get out of the truck. The driver did not move, instead leaning out the window of his truck. There was static, angry noises of a driver's barely audible beneath the roar of the engine. Come on. I travel this road every week. I have the permits. Cargo that'll spoil. You know the bosses will. Zhao let out a phlegm onto the road and saw the light of a long line of trucks reflected in it. He tossed the baton. You think I care about your boss, you stupid bastard? Get out of the vehicle and open the cargo door. The door opened, the man slinked from the driver's seat onto the road, his hands raised in surrender. He walked slowly to the back of the truck and, without a word, unlocked the back truck. The police officer clicked his flashlight, revealing stacks of beef and poultry, flies, and a broken refrigerator unit. He poked through the stacks, then, satisfied, clicked off the flashlight. The bosses won't like this. All these delays for what? Security? You think they'll care about security when the shelves are empty? Discontent or no, we need to continue these methodical searches. It was a quiet night in the barracks. A short way out of the heart of urban chaos, something considered a minor tragedy to those inside. If the horizon was not exactly clear, nothing was coming towards Private Hirano's guard post. Not a sound, not a single damn soul coming to receive punishment. His hands, desperately seeking a solution to their discomfort, wandered over his rifle, fingers brushing against his intricately crafted machine of death, fondling the guard around the trigger, but unable to pull it. The orders had not come. His hands were not in the end of a flood of bullets. His boots were not nestled deep in shattered skulls. There was only the sound of disturbed leaves outside and of scratching within. Lights out had already come, and so Kotas continued scraping away with his flashlight. The rest of the barracks did not complain, themselves busy in similar projects. He had taken to avoiding wearing his eye patches of late, and soon the mechanical glow cast into the reddish-black pit, where his vision lurked no more, only infernal, never-ending itch. He ignored it to focus on his task. Supposedly, these rounds were now stable, out of prototyping. Good. His knife flashed on and on in the limited night, carving names of previous hells, which the chief executive had sent them to shoot their barely functional toy guns. Of the true names of disgusting masses the chief executive had failed to pacify while they were sent away. All 5 companies, all over those whose decadence the chief executive resided, and of course several for the chief executive instead, just in case he missed. Concluding another uneventful staff meeting, Nagano shook the last man's hand and sat back in his desk. The unsigned order lingered in front of him, as it always did. Soon. Soon, but not yet. As he considered packing up and leaving for the day, he noticed the continued ghostly sensation of the last man's hand in his. Pervading itch, but one which cannot yet be scratched. Japan and the IJ garrison is considering if direct measures are needed to quell the riots. Ensure they maintain their confidence in you, or matters may be taken out of your hands. Very, very ominous, of course. The main thing I'm worried about, I think at this point, is Japanese observations. Right now, they're only observing. Shit. Actually, I'll go ahead and read that real quick. It was the end of the long day for Officer Zhao Ziyu of the Guangdong Police Force. The week since the chief executive's order pushed him to the border and began requiring mandatory thorough inspections of cargo. See all amount of things. He poked through winking, shit-stained pigs. He searched inside containers of cigarettes, occasionally keeping a few cartons for himself. Seen all manners of cheaply produced goods sprayed with paint to conceal defects. The whole experience provided him with a comprehensive, if unpleasant, perspective into exactly the kind of goods that Guangdong ran on. The blood-soaked materials that Japanese and people consumed without second thought. There were kinds of whores that would turn a weaker man red, but that was it. He'd seen no large weapon shipments, no explosive caches or bomb-making materials concealed beneath vegetables. All he had found among the hundreds of trucks he inspected was the usual contraband of porn and heroin. All the while, the protests had been as intense as ever. Zhao flicked a cigarette from his mouth and crushed it beneath his shoe. He ushered the last truck driver along before allowing the next to saddle up next to him. Long line traffic stretched before it. There was something to glean from all of this, he thought, something to be discerned by process of elimination. The radicals were magically turning vegetables and petty drugs into weapons. Whatever was driving the protest wasn't coming through the checkpoints. One possibility eliminated, at least. It's given us misleading evidence. I'll the save real quick. I want to see if we get something different if we select the other option. Set up border checkpoints. Council's already unhappy. Perhaps we can scale back and limit searches to suspicious vehicles. That should be better. Shit. Another long day for Officer Zhao Ziyi of Guangdong Police Force. The week since the chief executives pushed him to the border began requiring time-limited, non-invasive inspective cargo. He'd seen all manner of things. Let's see. The worst part, he thought, as he scanned rows of eggs, was that nothing that they were doing seemed to make a difference. Protest continues if nothing had happened. The Legislative Council grew on from annoyed to visibly aggrieved. Some had even taken to criticize him of PF publicly. Whatever chief executive had done hadn't worked. All it done was piss people off and give them inconclusive reports. Back to the drawing board, indeed. Shit. Let's start with the Consulate General's mail. This could go very much south, but... The police force headquarters was in the middle of its usual business. Recruits brought in bleeding suspects. For his laughter as the constable flirted with the secretary. Akio took a look at the scene before scowling and drawing the blinds on an unassuming smoke-filled conference room that he and other police leaders had secluded themselves in front. So, if Serpent has bitten us once before, how do we track the Burman back to their nest before they strike again? An older man, a long-established veteran of the force, rubbed his cigarette in the room's overflowing ashtray. Easy. Focus on the rural areas. They've always been dens of lawlessness, even in the old communist days. Never enough police. Obvious place for shipments and meetings. But you point out the issue with that yourself. There's never enough police. We'd have to make sure we had the resources to back the operation up. Marita Akio turned his head. Amid the cohorts of graying men was a single middle-aged officer. What would you say you recommended instead, Commissioner? Instead of asking to do something that we've always struggled with, we play to our strength. We look for illegal activity within the Three Pearls. They're already the logical brain center of the operation, the place where the criminals are sending the shipments. Police can investigate alongside the regular work. Not exactly settled, though, is it? If the Republic bastards figure out we're going asking around them, the whole operation is shot. I wonder if this is going to be like a... Let's see. Well, we already have a lot of strength in the Three Pearls already. I think the younger constable is right. We should focus on the Three Pearls. We have the experience. The middle-aged commissioner of the old veteran stood on the floor of a dingy factory on the outskirts of the Three Pearls. In a previous life, this place had made sweets or small pastries. The air was still filled with the odor of caramelized sugar, and a faded smile down from the upper wall. The veteran stared up at the empty expression as he inhaled deeply in a cigarette, ignoring the movements of other members of GDPF going about their work. He removed the cigarette from his mouth and tried to remember how many days of sting operation against the Republic had been active. Had been 2, 3. He didn't remember sleeping, only the steady stream of bodies in and out. Young officers excited for a chance to dress up as spies for chief executive. But dress up was all it was. For as vigorous as the commissioner was, for as much as he and the men labored in organizing steakhouse and tails and all sorts of surveillance, the operation turned up little use. PF did not find secret caches for protesters nor shadowy meetings between high-level Republic officials and dissidents, or the town of ordinary dramas of diplomatic life. Mornings with family, late nights at the office, the occasional visit to a secret lover or prostitute. They didn't stamped the used butt beneath a shoe. I think it's time to close the line of investigation. We search as hard as we can. Going any further only results in our exposure. The commissioner was silent for a long while. He sat his head down as if studying the factory's concrete floor. You're right, of course. I'll send out the order. Back to the drawing board. I'm wondering if I'm just clicking all the wrong options here and there's just something I'm missing. We should focus on rural towns. We have resources. Right? Nope, go back. Go back. Retreat. Retreat. Well, we have the experience. It's given us misleading evidence. After last meeting of the day, when the streets had long since been replaced by twinkling fires on Koshu Street's chief executive Matsushita thumbed through the assembled evidence against the Chinese Consulate General. Page were dog-eared, the contents already familiar chief executive, but you cannot help but reveal them over and over again, given the scale of decision at hand. Sadly, time will not be a luxury that Matsushita would enjoy forever. It's already half a miracle the Chinese can caught on to the police investigation already. More time spent following up on leads and concerning the activities of the Chinese government and of those of two representatives of Guangdong, the greater the risk it would all be exposed, creating a diplomatic nightmare. And yet, going in the other direction, accusing Consul General Song Yiguang and Attaché Wang Jinghu of actively subverting Guangdong was absolutely guaranteed to cause a diplomatic incident if there was enough proof to get Japan to take Guangdong's side. Would there even be enough evidence to ensure that? And if so, why waste more resources on a fool's errand? Masaharu sighed and flicked through the pages again. I wonder if there is... I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of looking through Reddit right now to figure out if there is a path. Keep digging. We don't have enough. We don't have anything, really, but... One could be forgiven if they describe the past deliberations of the legislative council as distorted, perhaps even anarchic. They could also be forgiven for mistaking it, as its previous works, as a boxing ring instead of an arena of debate. Even the worst of previous three assessments were to pale in comparison with the current reality of the scenes within the legislative council. If the past had been a boxing match, the present was a gruesome display of medieval melee. With knives were previously left stealthily in backs, they were now wielded openly with menace. Representatives that once made every precaution appear well-groomed, now descended happily into the bloodbath that rose around them. Matsushita did all he could to rise to the challenge. He insisted he alone could restore the stability that Guangdong had only recently lost. He alone could bring the state to its rightful place. All the council had to do was listen. Yet he found very few sympathetic ears outside of his allies. They accused him of power grab, doing nothing to save the economy, and even worse, capitulating to the rioters. If the riots were to gain the power in Guangdong, then the whole project would be staring down the barrel of a gun. The Legislative Council backed itself into a corner. Well, shit. Here we go again. Investigate their communiques. It's first class. The motive for any Chinese interference in Guangdong is self-evident. The RRC has never fully accepted Guangdong's existence. While Guangdong itself rules itself by means of Tokyo's fiat, the Chinese government has gone out of its way to belittle and stump Guangdong in every official way that matters. Bureaucratic delays, diplomatic snubs, and casual disdain have characterized nearly every interaction between Koshu and Nanjing. But a background history of resentment isn't enough to say what the Chinese are intervening now, of all times. The Chinese have, with some encouragement for Japanese and local Kenpai-Tai, been grudging economic and intelligence partners with Guangdong for over a decade. We can assume that the Chinese have always been spying on us, but to cross the line to direct action under the nose of the Japanese, there'd have to be some catalyst, some stage directions, transforming their intent to active disruption, even obscured beyond encoded language and misleading actions. Of course, getting our hands on these messages and fully understanding these activities would mean breaching the diplomatic privilege enjoyed by the Chinese Consulate General. The police proposed two courses of action: to intercept the Consul General's direct transmission from Nanjing, or their missive sent within Guangdong. I would say probably the latter. I'll try the latter. What are they doing in Guangdong itself? The Visible Hand Market. I like that title. With long practice strokes, Matsushita signed his name on the proposal and sat his pen down. The Consumer Goods Control Amendment, should it pass, would present a notable shift from his usual stance, enabling government to begin the stockpiling of essential goods and distribute them in the event of crisis to alleviate suffering among Guangdong's population. The most radical position was buried halfway in a short set of paragraphs stating the chief executive's right to enable price controls on food, water, fuel, sort of daily necessities that could have the prices explode to untenable heights in times of hardships. Much as he chafed under Suzuki's inept statism, there was a kernel of truth behind it. If Guangdong was to keep running, it couldn't afford to see its entire work base starve to death. Since raising wages without a question, the only solution was to lower prices to acceptable levels. There should be pushback, some of it from his own supporters, to any expansion of the government, but they would be made to understand. Compromise was the core of any business and success, after all. Matsushita had plenty in here to compromise on. Government shall provide, so the people may continue work. Large goods controls, reduce Smithsonian controls. It's going to reduce his Akio's sway on our decision making. Let's tone down our rhetoric. Stability is the order of the day, not punishment, not retribution. Our corporate leaders and make up the Cantonese government have rapidly denounced the recent events with rather strong connotations in their words. There's no other option for Matsushita to toe the middle line very, very carefully. Dissimilarly to the other corporate leaders, Matsushita will make a statement to criticize the police force's actions in handling of riots, while at the same time not completely denouncing the police, thus maintaining his full support for law enforcement. On top of this, Matsushita will also promise cooperation with the populace if the workers are retraining themselves in these times. In these times, the tongue truly is sharper than the sword. Following text is a confidential excerpt of an official report from the Guangdong Police Force. Do not share without unauthorized permission. Subject Wang Jiahu, Han Chinese male, approximately in his 50s, operates a political active chain from ROC within the state of Guangdong. Heavily surveillance over the course of several weeks have revealed a string of reported movements conducted on a daily basis by the subject. Though originally raising suspicion, these movements have been detailed to be simply profession-related visits to various minor officials, civil servants, and foreign representatives from within the co-prosperity sphere. Suspect does not seem to engage in any type of dubious activity or go on unusual breaks from his cyclical visits. Generally purchases a variety of newspapers from a roadside kiosk and spends up to 30 minutes sifting through them before leaving. The behavior is deemed not to be conspicuous and results purely from leisure. As such, monitoring of the suspect whereabouts has ceased indefinitely, and at this time, resources cannot be spent elsewhere. Addendum. After 5 weeks of silence, Guangdong Police Station has spared suspect Wang Jilu, free of any guilty sedition or underground illicit activities. Reopen the investigation, ramp up the force. He has to be guilty. I hope he's guilty. He was not guilty. Should probably focus more on Nanjing. Convos with Nanjing. Tone down the rhetoric. Oh, God. Official memorandum of the Consulate of the Republic of China in Koshu. Foreign Affairs, Office of Foreign Affairs, Nanjing, ROC. Greetings. Ground of recent events transpiring within the state of Guangdong, the situation remains muddled and chaotic. Main business is suspended operations, including industry, manufacturing, and public services. Consul General would like to make clear that the state's administration conduct during the crisis is nothing short of absolute ineptitude and incompetence. To manifest injustice is perpetuated by the administration itself. There is nobody to blame for the discord except for the administration, which has unwillingly and foolishly maintained an unjust and wrongful state of affairs. It certainly appears apparent that local Han Chinese majority will not be willing to restore harmony unless concessions are given. They have conjured a mighty storm. In response to this troubling set of circumstances, the Consul General would like to suggest a certain course of action be taken in order to mitigate the tumult. It might be prudent to deliver pressure into the Guangdong administration to compel them to act more swiftly and with caution regarding the Chinese unions, thus ending the rather lackadaisical official response. It might also be worthwhile to investigate the motives and possible demands given by the CCL via our connections within the Guangdong police force. There we go. Seeing as there are several Republican sympathizers and nationalists in their midst, those will have to remain highly secretive, as there may be severe consequences if somehow it were to reach the ears of certain folks. As always, the government is at liberty to simply ignore the suggestions provided and continue with the current distant approach. Observations with no action taken whatsoever as the South erupts in turbulence. It is highly advisable that the government take the concerns of the Consul General into consideration, as we do represent our brethren in Guangdong. Tensions are simply boiling over, and the Guangdong administration will have to tread lightly. Its citizenry are confronting a nation government structure that could topple with a slightest nudge. Final decision rests with you. Signed, Consul General Song Jiyong. Interesting. Continue to intercept their correspondence. Huh. To the Office of Chief Executive of Guangdong Civil Authority. On Tuesday of the previous week, the Consul General of the reorganized National Government of China received a letter from the Office of Chief Executive of the Guangdong Civil Authority inquiring on the security situation around the consulate compound. Such a place of concern are traditionally much appreciated and interpreted as a sign of respect. Indeed, Council has been prepared to provide thanks to Chief Executive and his staff. Regretfully, our office will become aware of conduct violating not only diplomatic protocol, but also undermining the sovereignty of the Chinese people and threatening of safety of diplomatic personnel. Past weeks, both diplomatic staff and our own security cameras observe individuals affiliated with GPF intercepting mail and packages delivered to diplomatic residents and the consulate itself. Many packages have been clearly tampered with and their contents disturbed. Timestamps for the majority of these episodes have been enclosed with this letter for your office's review. The brazenness of these actions represents an irreparable breach of trust between our governments. This office will take those actions necessary to preserve republic sovereignty and ensure its respect among nations. As such, it sent a full summary of these diplomatic violations to officials in Tokyo and Nanjing for further review. A full diplomatic complaint has been filed. Please direct all future correspondence through the appropriate channels. Signed, Consul General Zhong Shiguang. We've been caught with our pants down. Fall back, fall back, fall back. Retreat, reuse, recycle. I don't know. I wonder if there's nothing going on here. Look in their conversations. I apologize if it's kind of a more boring episode, by the way. I'm just kind of stumbling through this. This will be enough. Not willing to take a chance of being exposed. In summary, the right to privacy within the confines of their personal facility domiciles is inviolable by any other private citizen or organization. So the concluding lines of Privacy Acts, the recent addendum to the ordinance for effective oversight. Though the usual mix of mind-numbing bureaucratic language of government and mealy-mouthed corporate doublespeak, it laid out the newly enshrined rights of the citizens of Guangdong against corporate surveillance and stalking. Matsushita smiled as he read it. Pushback from Fujitsu with their constant inching towards spyware was to be expected, but Sony and Cheong Kong's votes would be taking little effort to balance that out. That left Matsushita as the kingmaker for the bill. Just the way you liked it. Its passing would be a boon for Matsushita. Not only would it appease the Chinese populace by giving them a small taste of liberty, the exceptions written into the bill for government surveillance and the national security needs mean that, in practice, Matsushita alone would have the right to monitor, cutting out all of the competitors. Giving this bill some teeth for failing to adhere was a risky plan. He knew that even smaller companies would go restless with the introduction of any form of consequence, but it was necessary to secure the monopoly. If there's one thing he knew, he liked monopolies. Codifies individual rights of privacy in their own home, and codifies penalties for violating privacy. I think we'll keep digging, if only for one last attempt. It was strange to see the factory like this. In the darkness of the night, the building, normally full of light and sound and sweat, seemed to loom unnaturally over the cityscape around it, the moonlight stretching its shadow over the street to the buildings opposite. Four men in black used that shadow for cover as they made their way to the padlocked factory gate. Slipping up to the gate, one of the men used a pair of bolt cutters to break the lock, careful to make as little noise as possible. Once inside the gate, the men split up without saying a word. The plan had been intensely rehearsed, and they each knew the factory inside and out. From outside the factory, it was hard to tell at first what was going on. An orange glow came from some of the windows, and at first it seemed like someone had turned the lights inside. It was only when the black smoke came pouring out the truth became obvious. It took the fire crews hours to snuff out the blaze, by which point the factory had been completely gutted, and several nearby buildings had been badly damaged. The four men were nowhere to be found. They slipped back into the night. Oh shit. The Senators are furious. Try to build a profile on these guys. Even as a work of the building, in the general case against the Chinese government and its agents in Guangdong was entrusted to the police, Chief Executive Matsuhara of Spots wandered back to the two men who had to be pulling the streets, Council General Song and Wang Jingzhu. The two men, I'm going to save again. It's going to be a long episode, I can already tell. The two men have been a known quantity in Guangdong for years. Song is a representative of the Chinese government, and Wang is the attaché directing Chinese intelligence operations in Guangdong. The two enmeshed in Guangdong to feasibly claim ignorance of any subversive activity, but linking them conclusively to said activity would be a different issue altogether. It struck Matsuhara that he, perhaps unique among the members of Guangdong's government and tycoons of the four companies, had a perspective of two men formed over years of interactions. If nothing else, those perspectives could be useful for the police to build a profile of Song and attaché Wang. Couldn't do so anyway. Give me the file on Council General Song. Let's see. Guangzhou, 1916. Bachelor's degree. Marvel trajectory of Song's career. Picked to be Council by 48, even if it was a country where China took heavy pain to snub was around. Perhaps that had been the point. Is there anything of note in his previous postings? Yingji Sorry, I knocked over a soda bottle. Yingji threw the thick sheaf of newspaper down on the table with a soft thwop. Quan looked up from his book, startled. Looking up at Yingji from behind thick glasses, Quan struck his feet off the table. Before he could speak, Yingji was already starting on a tirade, a slow of words, slamming into another. Whoa, slow down, what? The corporations are backing down. They're about to ceding power to the civilian government to better serve the interests of the people of Guangdong. All the at-shitting, all the work, it's finally paying off. Guang exhaled a cloud of smoke, stabbing out a cigarette in a cloud ashtray. As he stuck around another's mouth, he mumbled, "Not much to celebrate. Still Japanese running the city. This isn't freedom." Yingji scowled. Quan was always had to be cynic, the pessimist. Yesterday we were Zaibatsu puppets, today we're not. You don't see that as a positive change? Nope. Go have your little party, but we have a long way to go. Think too small, Yingji. I'll raise a glass when the last Japanese leaves the port for good. Small victories or empty appeasements? Well, we have less sway from... Well, I think I might just want to start wrapping this up soon. Beyond the storefront window of an electronics shop in Hong Kong, television flickered to another channel. Normally such an occurrence would go ignored, but what appeared on screen was a much greater interest from the usual farce. Chief Executive Matsushita Masuhara himself prepared to give a speech. I, Matsushita Masuhara, am here to deliver my sympathies to the people of Guangdong. Times are hard, that is undeniable. Not ask you to endure this forever. Only for now. A bright future awaits us all, so long as the Legislative Council continues to oversee our path forward, so long as the people have faith in their employees to do right by them. A crowd of people now gathered in front of the store, plainly shocked by Matsushita's words. Some wondered aloud if he was being forced to do something like this, when no such near apologetic statement has ever been released by the chief executive. We'd also like to thank our loyal police for making it possible for the good and law-abiding people to continue living their lives, even in these terribly chaotic times. They'll bunch the anarchists and radical terrorists who are responsible for making your lives more difficult. I ask you to continue cooperating with the police to the fullest extent, so we may crush these troublemakers and move on to the brighter future ahead. Matsushita's announcement finished, most of the prominent crowd dispersed, many muttering about how his promises meant nothing. Some, however, more hesitant. Matsushita himself had been pushed to say please and thank you to the average people, and even the position of the Legislative Council was indeed beginning to soften, if not in policy, then in spirit. Let's assert our presence. The situation is very fragile, and the rioters are running amok as if they have owned the streets. After what they have done and the policies that they have changed, they are still just troublemakers on the streets. With their recent actions, they are seen as giving in to the protesters, and this may give the wrong impression towards the populace that the government is weak and easily swayed. We do not want these kind of sentiments in the air. The rioters must not forget that they do not own the streets. They must also remember who is truly in control of Guangdong. We'll establish a large police presence, not to attack them up front, but show that we are still here, reminding rioters of our presence in the streets. Is there any chance to deploy special police? We'll give that a shot. It was easy to trace the goings in of diplomat. Their expertise, preferences, and political leanings were discernible through long paper trails and foreign postings. It made Song Jiwang noteworthy. A man who chose to focus on Asia, specializing in public diplomacy and political affairs. Not entirely surprising given the lack of diplomatic freedom afforded to Nanjing. Curiously, the Consul General's most exotic posting was not of streets of Germany or avenues of Washington, but Russia, amid the chaos of West Russian War. Tradition among the diplomatic corps to give fresh fate. Diplomats' foreign postings help them grow acclimated. Song can seem to draw on the short end stick amid the competition for foreign postings. Interesting. Well, what did he do during... Now, why did he return to Guangdong in 62? Even amid the flux and instability that marked the early days of the new Guangdong administration, personnel and family records could be traced if one was willing to look. Among the many things Guangdong lacked, its will was not one of them. The immediate family Song Jiguang would no longer reside within Guangdong's boundaries, but that in itself was hardly room for suspicion. Mass movement of people during the war were uprooted families and shattered communities. Yet the Consul General had always spoken fondly of the ancestral realm, a love that, in his own words, was no foreigner or immigrant would ever truly understand. Very biases of nativists, perhaps, but with family history traceable at least to the 1930s, their history in the area well predates the old chief executive or the most tenured veteran of the IGA garrison. The man has a point of touring the Free Pearls and walking the streets on top of his official duties. As may be, Goshu Guangzhou, as you might say, is home, even if he walks as a foreigner. Interesting. What did he do in the war? The blank spots in March of Consul General's fire from 37 to 48 were hardly unusual. The records of the old Chinese government, those that weren't burned, destroyed, or shredded by Chiang's regime, were otherwise lost to corruption, chaos, and general flux that marked the final years of the war in China. Those that did survive were frequently left without updated date, as middlemen and materials were consumed in the struggle for the Middle Kingdom. Only the living, both on paper and life, had their lives go on. Consul General would have been 21 when the Guangdong army crossed the Yangting River. University education placed on hold. Prime fighting age during the war. Like so many others, paper trails during those years vanished, reappearing in the records only when dust had settled. Interesting. But there was nothing, or at least nothing we found. Consul General had painted part of a picture. His family origins to Guangdong, a blank page during the war, command postings Russia in the 50s. But the pieces needed to put these things together weren't there. Full investigating Consul General's activities in history could be arranged, but require more of a reason than mere suspicion, and the resources and time needed for such an undertaking would surely be of better use elsewhere. Back to square one. Well, investigate Wang. Let's see. What exactly was his mission here in Guangdong? Ooh. As of present, the state of Guangdong has entered a state of chaos unheard of since the immediate period of war following the liberation. Entire sectors of major urban centers appear to have come under the sway of dissident groups. Occupied zones cannot be evenly split between politically oriented terrorists and criminal elements, both organized and disorganized. Momentum appears to lie in the hands of illicit Chinese labor organizations. Disturbance have been less severe in rural areas, which is believed to be the result of poor communication infrastructure and a sparse or decreasing population. Despite these pressing concerns, the active chief executive did not appear to match the severity of the situation, despite the obvious economic and social detriment caused by their continued interaction, and thus the legitimacy of Guangdong itself. They are so far proving unwilling or unable to resolve the situation correctly. Domestic security personnel, with assistance from Kenpai Tai, while currently unable to contain the significant spread of urban violence, have thus far proven inadequate to breach and neutralize centers of unrest. Heavier assistance is required. Communication with Tokyo and IJ High Command has thus far been proven sporadic. While agreeing with local command on the severity of the situation, they continue to invest powers of suppression within Guangdong civilian institutions. No protest has been issued, but present orders remain to observe and await further instruction. Imperial 23rd Army, Department of Communications. Relations between Guangdong's local security forces and those of Nanjing's government were professional at best and quite often never reached that level. Cooperation between the two had been sporadic at best, with Japanese security services often being drafted as mediators and go-betweens, given general trust between Koshu and Nanjing. Same story in the sphere. Tokyo was the only one who could keep everyone in line, if only because they could force everyone into compliance. Cooperation between the GPF and the Republic focused on cross-border activities, smuggling, trafficking, murders, and organized crime. In other words, enough to keep even the most well-funded security service occupied, and more than sufficient overwork for GPF. Fundamentally, there was too much noise to say where Wang had or hasn't done anything to change its situation, so world rights was a separate matter entirely. Missing piece. We're getting close to potentially dismantling the Federation of Tradesmen. Meet with notables and arrest them after nightfall on both sides. Investigate his connections with He Ying-ching. Despite the wide latitude afforded as political attaché, Wang has only taken the occasional leave to visit family in Guangxi. On the Lunar New Year, it appeared his contact with Guangxi and He Ying-ching extended beyond the perfunctories expected of diplomats, family ties aside. His wife, however, appeared to have no such reservations visiting Guangdong's neighbor when it seemed safe to do so. Records from Koshu Airport show that Wang's wife was a far more frequent visitor than Wang himself. Marital issues, homesickness, possible reasons were many, but also irrelevant. Wang, despite his history and family ties, seemed no closer to He Ying-ching than anyone else. Peculiar. Dig deeper into his military history. we'll take a mile. It's common sense that we have something to gain out of our rather profiting changes in policy, particularly on the status of workers' rights and such. There's no telling the rioters would simply stop causing trouble immediately after our recent change of policy. Thus, we've come up with a new and admittedly mildly risky strategy to make sure that the rioters stop. There's no telling what the rioters' response will be. Requests will be issued to the workers on the streets, asking the rioters to restrain their actions and limit themselves from carrying out further acts of violence on the street. Also make some subtle but noticeable threats of what might happen if they do not comply with our very polite request. Unlike so many of his fellow contemporaries, Wang Yingzhu had a military record that was mostly still intact. Last record of survivor line as he was with Yi Jingjing. When the last power broker was effective the Jingwei government in the war's final years. Demobilization of the RGOC's armed forces following the end of hostilities and the final defeat of the Chiang regime had spared Wang. A result, likely of having friends in high places, with Yingqing's relevance to the Nanjing government, allowing Wang to transfer to military intelligence in the 50s. About the possibility that Wang was perhaps not entirely in the intelligence service of his own volition, though, like any good soldier, he'd do his duties as best he could. Interesting. Slowly going down. We'll address the council. Japan is still observing the crisis. It seems there wasn't anything to be found. If there was, it couldn't be found without a far more thorough investigation than mere conjecture and surface-level research. Nanjing's political attaché had a well-connected wife and a history of the army before heading into intelligence. Investigators could be requested, of course, but GPF was already overworked, and the time and resources needed for such a task could be better used elsewhere, not wasted chasing suspicions about Nanjing's involvement. And the investigations on them, we can find nothing. This is too risky. Burn the files. After Matsushita had finished reviewing the file for the Chinese interference case, he sighed and closed the binder. It simply wasn't worth it. The potential consequences were dire. Even China was publicly rebuked by Japan. There are many places out of the central government's eyes where local officials could provide clandestine support to the rioters. Japan is extraordinarily powerful, yes, but it cannot have eyes everywhere at once. Matsushita considered filing it away in case more evidence came to light, but on consideration, the consequences for his government, if this was discovered, decided on a different route. He took out his lighter out of his pocket, flicked it open, and held it up to the pages. As he watched the file shrivel and float away in a shower of embers, he'd sensed he made the right choice. Schottenmeier might not have been intervening, but this was a hornet's nest that was apt to significantly hurt him, no matter which way it fell. Caution prevails. Resentfully. I hate to admit it, but yeah. Yeah, well, it was all worth a shot, wasn't it? Maybe it wasn't. But I'm going to end it there. Thanks for joining me on this extended video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Like if you liked, dislike if you didn't. Leave me comments down in the comment section below. Hit the sub button if you want to keep up with uploads. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye now.